That's probably the most fun I get to have as a minister other than christening babies. And in a way, maybe these are our new spiritual babies, right? Even those of you who've been here for a while. As Ashley said before she introduced turn. Change is afoot, and it is certainly doing its work in me. It has been for some time. And I cannot tell you how deeply grateful I am for the love and the support that I have felt this past week from all of you in this community. And I just want to say thank you for each and every one of you, for every prayer and every expression of support, every message, via email or Facebook or whatever it was. I have felt all of you, and it means so very much. As this time has unfolded, it became very clear to me that we needed to kind of change direction, and I spoke about that in the midweek message that I wrote, that while we had planned on studying a very excellent book on the power of Sabbath and rest and taking that time to allow things to unfold, that what came to me very clearly was the message that we as a congregation need to understand how we can not only endure change, but how we can thrive in it, how we can allow it to bring our spirits to new and greater heights. So to that end, what we have done is chosen this particular book to begin working with on Wednesday nights, and I will be speaking from it for a while on Sunday morning. It's called Finding Yourself in Transition, and it was written by Reverend Robert Brummett. We're going to have, it's funny, in ministerial school we talk about being Brummetized, because Robert has for about 15 years been one of the primary teachers at Unity Institute, and he teaches things like self-awareness and prayer and meditation, all of the counseling series, pastoral studies, which we sometimes call the March Through Hell, because it's about counseling people through some of those darker periods of life, and tends to bring up a lot of those things that we have walked through ourselves from time to time. But no one is unchanged by their time with Robert. Later this year, we are going to be studying his book, Birthing a New Reality, and boy, are we ever going to be. And he's actually planning on being here with us to kick that off the last weekend in September. He has also agreed to preside over mine and Christine's release of vows that weekend. And for him to do that will be very meaningful. I hope that he will be able to make it. He has recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Interestingly enough, he is referring to it as his fierce teacher, not his enemy, not his adversary. And as I think about what we have been learning this year about living with nothing and no one against us, what a great example he is of that. My fierce teacher. So many of us could say that about the transitions that we are walking through in our lives. I know that in discussion with Christine some time ago, I said, I hope that I learn whatever it is I am supposed to be learning from this, because I don't ever want to have to go through this again. And that's my hope for each of us, through all the things that we walk through in this world, all of the fierce teachers that we are presented with, my hope is that we learn. My hope is that we are able to make those interchanges, that we're able to learn to see the world in a little bit different way than we did when we went into it. So that when we come out of it, we come out at a little higher vibration, a little further up the spiral, a little better prepared. And we don't have to go through this all over again. In the first chapter of that book, Robert talks about the paradox of change. And there's some things that we have to understand up front before we can really make sense of everything that we need to do as life changes. And one of the first things that we have to understand is that life is constantly changing. He mentions the fact that change seems to be coming faster and faster now, that we are confronted with more in the span of a year or two in terms of change than our great-grandparents may have been in a lifetime. Technology changes faster, information floods at us faster, and in some ways we are becoming, I think, almost numbed by the amount of change that we are being asked to absorb. And the problem with being numbed is we don't grow spiritually when we're numb. Believe me, I tried numbing myself for a couple of decades. It doesn't work. I remember Jim Sherry was the president of a company I worked for some time ago. Really smart man. And we were in the technology sector. And he was giving a speech via, we had kind of a voice setup. It was like an early conference call. And he was telling the company that the way things have been is that we would have a change for a while, and then the change would be over with and we'd level off and there'd be business as usual for a while. And then we'd have another little change and things would level off and it would be business as usual for a while. And he said, this is the paradigm shift. There are no more plateaus. Everything is changing constantly. Robert talks about that word, and I think it got overused there for a while, particularly in the 90s, when we talk about paradigm shifts. And he talks about its meaning in Greek, and that essentially what it means is it's a pattern from which other things are created. It's the way that we understand and make sense out of the world. And what happens to us when we are presented with a different paradigm is that we as humans, we as thinking, feeling beings are presented with something that is unfamiliar. And at the very deepest level of our consciousness, it's frightening. You see, the reason that we fear change goes all the way back to our reptilian brain, the lowest, most early developed portion of the human brain. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. And essentially what its job was to keep us alive. And looking out there on the tundra or the forest or wherever it was that our ancestors happened to be from, anything that was different had to be identified and categorized as a threat or not a threat. So that was kind of the beginning of our fear of the unknown. If I don't know about it, it might want to eat me. And our need to make meaning. I have another professor from the Institute who likes to say that we are meaning-making machines, because what we are going to do is assign meaning to everything in our life. Now, here's the real key. When it comes to change, it is not necessarily the change that affects us. It's the meaning we assign to it that affects us. right? I think about some of the things that have happened in my life and how it felt in the moment, and now how it really looks since I've been able to pull back and take a look, with the benefit of seeing how it all worked out. I think about when the mother of my children said I had to go. That was the impetus for me getting sober. And at the time, the breakup of that relationship seemed like the end of the world. In retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it's less about the fact that something happens, whether it's someone making their transition, a job we get fired from, a relationship that's ended. And it's more about how we see it, what meaning we assign to it in the moment. I'll leave this anonymous, but I know of one young girl who, when her mother was filing for divorce, told her mother, "You're killing me." Because the paradigm she was used to, the family that she was used to, was no more. So she had to adapt to a new understanding. Now, many, many years later, she's a very happy, well-adjusted adult, that little girl who thought she was being killed. But in that moment, it was very real pain. So this week, as we look through and begin to try to make sense out of some of the changes that we are involved in right now, or some of the changes that we may not have fully let go of, there are two things that I want you to be watchful for. And the first one is directly from this quote. Now, we have said many times that we want to change. I know I've often said, "Oh yeah, I can change. I'll fix that." But as Robert says, ironically, there is something within us that unconsciously resists these very changes we consciously desire. Anyone who's ever dealt with any kind of addiction knows exactly what that feels like, right? We want to change, and yet we find ourselves going back in that same old behavior pattern again and again and again, whether it's picking up a drink or a drug or a cookie or a credit card or whatever it may be. One thing I would invite you to do this week is to take a look at those places where you are resisting change your heart is asking you to make. Resisting change your mind knows is good for you. The other thing that I would like to caution or ask everyone to think about this week is simply in the moment, when change comes, when it causes pain, be kind to yourself and allow yourself to grieve. So often in unity we are afraid of the dark. We are afraid of negative emotions. We sometimes get a little new age, new thought guilt that says, gee, if I can't just accept this and be all happy, joyful about it, there's something wrong with me. I'm doing this wrong. As human beings, we're allowed to grieve. And quite frankly, we'll never get through the healing process we need to get through unless we walk through all of the stages of grief. So I would also invite you, if you have been experiencing change, if you've lost a loved one or a job or a relationship or whatever, give yourself time to grieve for whatever that thing is, and do it in your own way. And don't let anyone tell you you're wrong for doing it, or you're taking too long, or you're not doing it loud enough, or you're doing it too loudly. You know, we all grieve differently, and that's one of the things I learned from Robert. He said grief is different for every person, and no one does it wrong. You know, we need to take the time that we need to take. And one of the wonderful things about being here with you in this community is that we can love each other and support each other through that grief. We can be with one another in those tears, knowing that at some point we're going to emerge into the sun again. It's no fun going through some of the changes life throws at us alone. And the good news today is you don't have to. We are here for you if you are experiencing change. Before I wrap this up, I would like for just a moment for us to move into prayer and remember our brother Shelley Richardson, who is very likely making his transition this weekend. He's been in hospice for some time. And he was one of the first members of this church that reached out to me when I was hired. Before I even got here, I got an email from Shelley, a very long email. Yeah, if you know Shelley, that's very in character for him. But he's such a gentle, sweet guy, and he's touched a lot of people. So please join me in prayer. Sweet Spirit, today as we hold our brother Shelley in our hearts, we know that as he makes his transition, he's not gone from us. He remains in our hearts, in our minds, in this place. He leaves a legacy behind, a legacy of love, of powerfully caring, of giving. And as we know, we know that he is returning to you. We know that he and none of us have ever truly left. It is only the illusion of separation. The illusion of separation that we sometimes see in death can be upsetting, and in this moment we allow ourselves to grieve and we allow ourselves to comfort. We allow ourselves to love. And we allow ourselves to laugh in memory of the joy that we shared with him and with all the precious ones that we have let go of. We truly are beings of light. And when we shuffle off these mortal coils, we shine. We shine. Shelley, we wish you Godspeed, and may flights of angels sing you to your rest. We are with you in spirit, dear brother, for we are all one. So it is. Thank you.